company vows to sue over damages after New Mexico authorities destroy cannabis crops. State police have destroyed tens of thousands of pounds of marijuana plants at greenhouses in northwestern New Mexico. Excuse me. Making what regulators say is the largest seizure and destruction of cannabis in New Mexico since new possession and cultivation laws took effect in 2021. Authorities have announced the operation Monday, saying dozens of agents were assigned to eradicate the plants in October. The State Cannabis Control Division had started the process of revoking the license of NNK Equity LLC, having filed a non-compliance order and a default order earlier this year. The company was accused of not posting its license on site, failing to obtain water rights for cultivation, not having cameras that could monitor certain areas of its operation, and violating sanitation and health requirements. The organization involved showed a blatant disregard for the laws of the state, and we will prove that once the investigation is over. New Mexico State Police Chief Troy Weisler said in a statement. Jacob Candelaria, an Albuquerque attorney who represents NNK Equity LLC, disputed the state's claims and accused regulators and state police of violating his client's civil rights. He said the state failed to properly serve notice of its intent to revoke company's license and subsequently deny the request for a hearing on the merits of the case. He said clients Irving Lin and Bao Shu speak Mandarin Chinese and have limited ability to understand the written English language. Lin asked for a Chinese translation, but the attorney said regulators did not respond to his request. The Cannabis Control Division stated in filings related to the case that it complied with notice and hearing requirements and had afforded the company its due process rights. The company plans to ask the state district judge to set aside the order revoking the license and to order the state regulators to hold a hearing, Candelaria said. He added that NNK Equity LLC also plans to sue the state for destroying what he said amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars of private property. The idea that law enforcement officers can destroy public property based upon a temporary restraining order, which can be entered without notice to all parties and before a hearing on the evidence, which was the case here, should concern all of us who believe in the Constitution. According to state regulators, NNK Equity was issued a license in December of 2023 for a marijuana growing operation at a property in Waterflow, a rural area on the edge of the Navajo Nation and just south of the Colorado border. The region also made headlines earlier this year when state regulators cracked down on two other operations, and Navajo Nation authorities ended up filing their own charges against two tribal members. In the latest case, the Cannabis Control Division conducted a compliance check in June and determined that NNK Equity had exceeded its allotted plant count. The New Mexico State Police Special Investigations Unit was brought in and later found plants at a second location that was not licensed. The violations outlined by the state regulators also involve transportation and tracking requirements, which include assigning identifying numbers to each plant. That's the story today. This is a very interesting story from New Mexico. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Dana, I'd love to hear what you think too. That's Saman Razani for High 9 News signing off.
I'm sorry, officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that.
This is just a gross overreach of government, in my opinion.
Yeah, Jenny.
So they put up a TRO.
Because he had an unlicensed operation as well, so he knew what he was doing. He knew enough that he had a licensed facility. So having an unlicensed facility and a licensed facility tells me that you should probably have a license to do this.
Well, how do we know he wasn't just growing hemp?
Oh, Jason.
Just saying.
But the thing is, so it looks like what happened was they put a TRO up, a temporary restraining order. Mm-hmm. And they went on the property and raided the property based on that TRO. That's the part here that's interesting.
That is super interesting because if they to raid the property, they should have just gotten a search warrant as opposed to needing a TRO.
Did they screw up?
You don't necessarily need a search warrant if it's a civil action and it's against somebody who's licensed and has agreed as part of their license that they can be enforced against. The thing that we need to also remember is that stem count is an antiquated way of holding back cultivators. really we should be talking in terms of canopy square footage, and how many stems somebody uses to fill that square footage should be a cultivator's or choice. But we also need to think about for a second, there are limited enforcement mechanisms, and these people had a big enough operation that they certainly could have done a better job paying a third-party compliance person or having an in-house person. And so look, if it was one thing, I'm going to side on the side of private enterprise and say give them a break. But when we're talking about this many violations, not having up the appropriate safety cameras, like the question becomes, are these people using a license as cover to just do whatever they want? And does that really help the broader regulated community? And does it support regulation? And does it support loosening the burdensome regulation on good actors? I can't say from this that these people appear like they were trying their best to be in compliance.
Well, Cannabis Legalization News, who happens to be in the chat, and hello, Tom, and just so you know, they do a cannabis news show every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. 2 or 3 p.m. Central Time, says hemp is weed, which I totally agree with. It's all the same thing. It's all cannabis sativa L if you look at the Controlled Substances Act.
Yes, and they were growing weed. So, like, this guy would make no effort to do anything other than to skirt the license system. Like, it's not, like, this is egregious. It's not like, oh, oops, we were trying our best. We didn't understand the regulations. Like, it was, I have the salt recipe. Here come the Asian bubbas. Buy them.
Right, yeah. And he knows better, too, right? Because he has a legal operation, right?
Right.
There's so many.
How do you know someone didn't sell them a bunch of hemp plants and they turned out to not be hemp plants?
They were all Hermy hemp. It was all bunk. It was.
He thought he was buying a whole bunch of auto flowers, and then still he got stocked with real flowers.
I mean, it is true that it is a dangerous precedent when government regulators start destroying the personal property of businesses with a blatant disregard for due process. I am not disagreeing with that. And these people don't look like they really cared about much. And so I think we have two very competing schools of thought. One is like, look, you're innocent until proven guilty. Why would you gut punch a business by destroying its inventory prior to a really thorough process? And the other is, when you get a license, you are giving up a lot of due process in order to be in that regulated supply chain. And with that, there is more than a little bit of a tendency for those regulators to overdo their job. I mean, we've seen footage in California of DCC appointed regulated grows, and they're literally shooting people's dogs as they come onto the property.
Eating the dogs.
That's in Columbus, Ohio, where they're eating the dogs and the cats.
And you eat them, but we have seen
we
in South Dakota where they're actually shooting the dogs in the face.
We know the police are not the smart, so it's like that's why they have to give back money to these operations that they raid and they fuck up their stuff. So it's not a surprise. I mean, they might have overstepped. We'll see how it all shakes out, but New Mexico, we'll see. I think these smaller states have more of a potential stranglehold on the operators than other larger states, like let's say New York, for instance, because there's just so many people there that are just going to do what they do, that enforcement has to go there instead of in New Mexico, where it's a lot fewer. But let's see what happens. I know a lot of good operators in New Mexico, so we do want to shine a light on the great operators in New Mexico that are doing a great job, that are following the rules, that are doing a compliant job, and they're delivering good product and clean product to their consumers, to their patients, and to their adult use.
I think the strongest case that can be made by any industry is that. It's none of the governments, not that they're not doing their job right, or they're not doing, or they're doing it right, or they're not doing it right. The question is whether or not this should be fundamentally the business of government itself. Correct. And that's what it comes down to, because if indeed there were problems with something that people were consuming, okay, yeah, But do you want the government to decide what you are fundamentally, the basic product is whether or not you should be able to consume that and make your own choices. And if you let the government make the choices for you, they're going to find every excuse possible to come and exert their power. And that's what's kept our country free over the years, is that the American people didn't come here from all parts of the world to live under a controlled situation where the government's going to tell them what to do. And I think that a lot of the issues that we're bringing up today, and I'm listening very intently here, could be settled just as saying we should limit the government's power over our lives in general, and rather than just in specific cases.
Fair enough.
You're right. You're completely right. But isn't that like an overall, philosophy, and really hard to just say, okay, government, get out of our lives? Right? It has to be done with little steps like this.
Well, you got to take your case to the American people, and when you got to have political people who are willing to do that. And most of the time, they're being pushed into positions of, well, what can I do for my local constituency only? And I think the greater issue is what degree of freedom do we have in our country, and how does limiting that in whatever communities affect our ability to live the decent lives we want to live?
I would say the biggest issue is that we've become a product for the politicians to use, and that is the issue. We're not out here selling product. We are the product, and that has to change. That paradigm has to shift immediately. We have to regain, this idea of like we the citizens, pick the politicians to impose our ideas and our will instead of get rule and ideas imposed upon us. And I don't know. I mean, my parents immigrated to this country, and so I was born and raised under the auspice of this freedom that truly, we're not seeing these days, and it's because we're just giving it up, and we're giving up. We're laying down, and that's the problem.
Look, part of the problem is because the red freedom is different from the blue freedom.
We're not going all there.